Hello, everybody. Simon here again. Welcome to my kitchen. Still sort of semi-locked down, as you can see. The Zoom conference calls that all of us are used to are fantastic. You know, you can really get let into each other's homes and chat to one another directly. But this is really just me talking to my laptop and hoping that people are on the other end. So thanks for tuning in. We've got a really cool survey to feed back on this morning. During the course of the last survey report back that we had, the last webinar, we had some great questions and answers at the end. One of the questions that came up was, why don't you do a consumer-facing survey just to see what the response to this COVID-19 crisis has been from the consumers in the market? And so we decided to take that on. And it was a fantastic response from the consumers that we engaged with on the platform. We were very pleased at how quickly people jumped on board, gave us their insight and their feedback. And so we'll be able to share that with you during the course of the morning. And if you're out on the east, the afternoon. So we're almost ready to go. I can see there are a number of you already on the call. Thanks very much for joining. I just want to remind you that the Q&A is open during the whole webinar. So you'll find a Q&A tab on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you fire that up, you can ask questions and we'll try and answer them at the end of the presentation. So at any point, if you've got something you want to go back to or a slide that you want to pick up and just dig into more detail, please feel free to launch the Q&A and I'll try and get to those questions at the end. All right, let's get it going. I'm going to share my screen. Brilliant. So as I said, we did a great agency-facing survey, one that we dug into insight from your peers and what key industry players were talking about. And one of the great nuggets that came out of that was, let's talk about the consumers. How are they experiencing this lockdown? How are they experiencing the challenges from COVID-19? And this is the result of that. We sent out a survey to our database of consumers, and we have quite an active database because obviously everybody that's looking for property on our platform signs up for things like property alerts, to follow certain neighborhoods, to follow certain properties that they enjoy or favorite. And so by speaking to that database, we were able to get over 1,000 responses. So in the end, we had 1,070 Canadian property shoppers come back to us on the survey and give us their insight. And again, the reason we're doing this is really just to peel back the layers of uncertainty. I mean, no one knows what this world is going to look like post-pandemic. We're hoping that we return to some sense of normalcy sooner rather than later. But we're just trying to get as much insight as we can about how this crisis may impact things like financial position of the people in the market, the psychology around home ownership, and the consumer behavior that we all need to keep our businesses thriving and functioning. So we've split this result, this survey into 3 key sections. The first one is really the direct impact of the crisis on consumers. So how are they feeling the effects of COVID-19, social distancing, and the challenges that they have there? And the second section will be about the role that digital marketing platforms like ours, REW, and others are playing a greater and greater role in the marketing of property, which makes sense. I mean, when you're locked in your house like this, I think if you look at what's happened to Zoom's membership, going from a couple of 100 million, which is a fantastic user base, to now as big as some of the social media platforms like Facebook in the matter of 6 weeks. It shows you how the digital adoption, the rate of digital adoption has just gone through the roof. And then the third piece will be about what challenges are consumers expecting, and this is perhaps the piece that has the most insight, the most telling view into what do they expect to be difficult, how can you help them in new ways, adapt your business processes to suit what they're thinking, and that's what we'll go through in the third section. So first of all, who replied to the survey? Who came back to us and gave us some feedback? As I said, well over 1,000 people responded to the survey, and they defined themselves in different ways. So obviously there's the age demographics, and the bulk of them sitting between 35 and 65, which is what you'd expect for a property orientated audience. But a healthy chunk of the market over 65, which is really interesting to see. So people with kind of a long-term place in the property market. If you look at how they describe themselves over the course of their sort of in the industry, we had just under 10% of them as defining themselves as real estate investors, which is a really interesting market to see how the crisis is impacting on them. 13% defining themselves as a renter or a tenant. So perhaps looking at our site just to evaluate what the options look like in the long term for them. Recent first-time home buyers, 15%, and the bulk, 63% long-term homeowners. So this is a great sample of your market and the people that you would work with on a day-to-day basis. Predominantly long-time homeowners, but with a great mix of investors, first-time buyers, and people that are potentially entering the market as well. So what is their role in the market? We asked them, you know, what is your intent? Where have you been? What have you been doing? Just under 50% of them were actively looking to buy a home. And 33% of them say currently not in the market. So really just using REW.ca as a platform to stay connected with the property market, stay connected with what the options look like for them in the future, but not actively looking to buy. A great chunk of people saying looking to sell my home. So 15% of consumers that answered the survey. And I think that's an important thing. You know, at REW, we see millions of browsers on the platform every month. And so it's very easy to become blind to the people behind those numbers. And I think what's been really great for us is to peel back the layers and actually look at these consumers as the valuable people that they are. And even the 1,000 people that have responded here, these are the type of people that we really want to connect with you, the realtors and the real estate professionals in the market. So us being able to say, wow, almost 150 of these people are looking to sell their home is some great insight. And then a small fraction looking for a rental, because of course, up until now, our platform hasn't offered rentals. Before the pandemic, we asked people, how seriously were you searching for a home prior to the crisis that hit really from middle of March? So we're almost 2 months in now. 28% saying moderately seriously and 21% saying very seriously. So, you know, the combination of those two is a significant share of the market that were seriously looking for a property ahead of this. 20% not that seriously, 18% not that seriously at all, and 14% sort of in between. So certainly the bulk of the sample set was saying, you know, we were in the market before this pandemic hit. So we're talking to the right people. Then we asked I guess the real question, you know, if considering all the challenges of COVID-19, considering the challenges of moving, of registration, of viewing, of transacting, the uncertainties on a financial basis, a simple question, would you move during the COVID-19 crisis if you found the perfect home? And I think this tells very much the story that we're going to tell throughout the survey response. 60% still having a positive and optimistic outlook, saying, yes, I would move if I found the perfect home. 40% saying no. Now, obviously, that takes into account the people that expressed that they weren't already in the market. So you could say that this is actually skewed negatively, and the percentage of people that would move if they were actively in the market would be higher. So overall, the perception is somewhat positive, cautiously positive, even though the crisis is having a big impact. This is an interesting one to contrast two responses. So we asked people, were you planning on moving to a new home in 2020? And are you still looking for a new home during the pandemic? So these two questions, if you kind of contrast the two, you can see what reduction in consumer intent there may have been due to COVID-19. So, how many of them were planning on a new home during the course of the year? 52% said yes. How many are still looking for a new home during the pandemic? 44% said yes. So we've seen a drop off there of 8% of the respondents. So definitely having an impact, but not as big as you would have thought on consumer intent. So very interesting feedback from the market there. This was a fascinating question, because we asked a similar question of you in our agent survey, just to say, how long do you expect the direct impact of this crisis to last, and how long do you think it may take for a recovery? Now, if you can remember your survey questions, it is 2-3 weeks ago now, which feels like 2 or 3 years ago now, considering how things are moving so quickly. But you can look back at those survey results and you can kind of contrast them with what we're seeing in this one. But by and large, consumers are a little bit more conservative in their views. They view that the direct impact of COVID-19 is not a 3 to 6 month issue. The green is the direct impact. So you can see the bulk of the responses are between 6 and 18 months for the direct impact of the pandemic. And their time for recovery ranges pretty evenly between 12 to 18 months, 18 to 24, and 24 months plus. But definitely on the longer time frame end of the scale. So that's some good insight. Consumers do think that the direct impact and the recovery period will take longer than certainly the real estate professionals anticipated in our previous survey. Financial impact to the consumers. I think this is the biggest question that we all have, is what is the economic fallout going to be from the pandemic, the social distancing rules, and the changes in the structure of how people are employed and where they get their income from. So 46%, which is an extraordinarily high number, report a direct impact to their financial position due to the crisis. And I think that's a number that will definitely have a knock-on effect to the real estate industry in the coming months. Only 6% reporting that they have lost their job, but I say only 6%, that's still a lot of people in the course of a few weeks to have lost their job. And the bulk of them, 39%, reporting a reduced income situation as a result of the pandemic. So you combine those two, and it's 45%, but it's a significant impact to their position. 54% reporting no impact. So at least we can say there's a foundation or a component of the market that hasn't seen any significant change to their financial position. Now we're really just talking about their intent and their psychology around home purchasing, and if that's taken any impact as a result of the crisis. So this is a detailed dig into, how has this impacted the purchasing power of consumers? And so we asked the question, how has your financial ability to purchase a home been impacted by COVID-19? And 38% reporting that their financial ability has been negatively affected. So we asked, on a scale, on a range, has this impacted you positively? And very, very few people said that it had a positive impact, but some of them did. The bulk, again, 54%, is the same as that previous result. 54% no impact, 54% no impact. And then the rest quite negative, so significantly negative. And those are the people that have had reduced income or a job loss as a result of this. So that was a little breakdown, and certainly you'll get the survey after this webinar. Thanks for bearing with me during the presentation, but of course you can dig into the concepts yourself when we send you the slides. The second section is the role of digital marketing platforms. So that's where we sit in the market, this kind of platform between the consumer and the real estate professionals. And our job really is to make the connection as effective and useful for both sides of that transaction as we can. So what has our role been during this crisis? First of all, we asked, how important are real estate websites like REW.ca during the COVID-19 crisis? So we wanted to get a gauge of, are consumers viewing them as a critical resource, or are they finding them sort of no more useful than they've ever been. And what's interesting is, 87% of the respondents, 80% of the respondents, a significant number of the respondents saying, this is now a critical resource. Having a digital platform with an always on view of the markets, being able to look at these properties, walk through them, experience them, communicate with agents on a real-time basis. This is important to me in my property search. And that makes sense because it's not like you have a lot of other ways to do that right now. Then we asked, where have you looked for property in the last 30 days? So we wanted to make sure that these people are actively searching for property in some fashion. And property websites by far were the leading source of that information. Real estate print magazines and supplements, I think it's a difficult time for those kind of services. Advertising run, distribution orientated services have been hit quite hard recently. Billboards are obviously just not effective if people are not driving around, commuting, walking to the cafes on a daily basis. So there's been a lot less interaction with those. Curbside real estate boards, I must say, in my little neighborhood, I've been going down to the shops or cycling around or taking the dog for a walk, and I have seen a number of you still continuing to operate with curbside boards and viewings and as far as I can tell, sticking to the guidelines that are in place, but running your businesses. And it's very inspiring to see that activity continuing. And I commend you guys for that. We asked perhaps a little bit of a self-serving question, but we certainly wanted to know what consumers are using, which real estate platforms are the ones that they choose and prefer, so that we can better understand the types of features and services that they're enjoying and that they're working or connecting with at this time. And I'm pleased to see that REW.ca was, at least across the people that we surveyed, a favorite platform of theirs. There were other key players in that space, and your own individual realtor websites were a strong component of that. 14% of the responses say that they prefer using your websites. So that's a testament to the great website players like Realty Ninja and other that are building out great services, and the effort that you put into marketing those platforms. Most popular viewing features. So, this is certainly something that we wanted to explore more, is what type of media interaction, what type of features on our platforms are the most used and the most enjoyed by the consumers. And it isn't really a surprise that the video and virtual tour content is by far the most interesting to people. When you can't physically view a property, you want to see as much of that property online as you can. And I think leading the way in that respect are these 360 scans and, virtual presentations of homes. And that's not unusual. I think one thing we left out, it was an error of ours when we did the survey, but we should have put obviously picture galleries and photos as one of the options, because under our other responses, those were a lot of the responses saying, look, we think photos are still a very key part of the journey. Virtual open houses, this was interesting. So this is not a concept that has really existed prior to this COVID pandemic. It was very margin before. Now it's being thrust into the limelight. You should do these live showings, you should do these live stream open houses, and platforms like Realtor.ca, REW.ca, and others are promoting those kinds of virtual open house opportunities as much as we can. And consumers are responding. For something that was very fringe 2 months ago, to have 20% of people say, they are enjoying interacting with that is a sign that they are working. And I read a fascinating article from a company in New Zealand that had been marketing property during this pandemic, had done 175 sales, in fact, through their group during the lockdown. And they were done by using the virtual tour content. And just as I'm doing now, the agent speaking to consumers that wish to tour that property, but touring them through the virtual tour on a Zoom call like this. So sharing their screen, talking to the consumer, asking their questions, showing them around the room, showing them around the house. And I thought that was a very novel and interesting approach, the combination of media types. And we did see that. We saw this question here: which type of digital property tour would you prefer? We had a lot of respondents say self-guided tour is great, agent-guided virtual tour is great, but some combination of both was by far the preference. So where you can combine the virtual tour assets or the 360 scans or the floor plans or even the picture galleries with a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams or Skype, or whatever the platform is that you choose, with some kind of video conference, consumers seem to be responding very well to that. Then, I mean, it's not a silver bullet though, because what we wanted to gauge is how are consumers going to respond after the pandemic? You know, is this something that's changing consumer behavior for good, or is this something that is really temporary and related to the moment that we find ourselves in? So first of all, we asked, rate your preferred options to view a home during COVID-19. Video calls with agents, live stream open houses, and virtual tours. Virtual tours came out the winner, but as you can see, it's a fairly even split across them. The more interesting question was, rate your preferred options to view a home after COVID-19. And what's really interesting is in-person viewings and traditional open houses still lead the way in terms of how consumers expect to interact with real estate in the future. And that's something that I didn't expect. I would have expected the virtual tour or video calls with agents to be a little bit higher up in the ranking than they appear here. But certainly people are looking forward to actually viewing the property in its fullness once again. I have to say, part of that is probably to do with how much people trust those digital displays of property. And I think there's still a way to come to make that experience 100% credible to a consumer. Then we also asked, what is the likelihood of you buying or renting? So actually, making a decision and transacting based only on a virtual tour. So, what if the world comes to that and you can only ever experience property through your laptop or through your phone, and virtual tours are sort of the best expose that we have right now? Would you buy or rent a home using just that media? And what's interesting is the bulk, these colors indicate, so blue is not willing at all, dark blue is not willing, neutral is the yellow, very willing and willing are in the green. So you can see certainly in buying a home, very few people are willing to buy a home using just a virtual tour. The broad majority of them are saying, look, we're probably not ready for that yet. Although I will point to that New Zealand example again and say, processing 175 transactions during lockdown using only digital media points to a different behavior. But certainly the consumers here in Canada are responding, saying, not very many of us want to buy a home only online. Renting a home, that percentage easily doubles. So it's interesting to see that what's happening in rentals may come to sales, but it may take some time. So that was the role of the platforms and the features and the kind of things that are online and how they're playing a role in consumers' decision-making and evaluation process. Now we look at the biggest challenges that consumers are expecting to see and how they intend addressing them. So first of all, we asked, what are the biggest challenges you expect to face in the next 3 months? And just to enumerate these, because I know they're a little bit small on your screen, not enough property on the market. So a concern about listing supply, a concern about affordability, homes being too expensive, viewing homes, so actually seeing homes, they see that as a challenge, closing a sale, getting a mortgage, and then a number of other ones. So the green is over the next 3 months and the blue is over the next 12. So first of all, you can see the affordability question is still a major concern for people, and probably even more so now that there's been this financial impact to their purchasing power. So affordability and homes being too expensive and people being priced out of the market is definitely a key concern. Interestingly, viewing homes is the bigger concern in the next 3 months. So marginally ahead of homes being too expensive is the concern that they won't be able to view the homes effectively. And that's something that I think, platforms can work with real estate professionals to mitigate. The affordability question, that's more of a market dynamic, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in the coming weeks and months. Another thing that I'll point to is the concern difference, or the concern gap, between 3 and 12 months on the mortgage side. So a lot of people thinking that, the mortgage is not the biggest problem right now, but over the course of the next 12 months, there's a concern that getting a mortgage may be more and more difficult. And so there's an anticipated concern there. And again, that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Concerns about viewing homes, they look like a temporary concern. People are not too worried about that challenge in the long term. Again, this is a similar question. What factors do you consider to be the most important in buying a home after the crisis? So here we spoke about mainly financial concerns, and the far and away the leader was this concern around affordability. Now, this is something that I think is not new to the Canadian real estate market, and in particular the two biggest markets of Toronto and Vancouver from a sort of value and volume perspective. I think people are going to look for more affordable housing options. I was looking at the Greater Vancouver Board sales stats for April, and what was really interesting to see there was the difference in number of listings on the market, so the listing ratio to the sales ratio. And detached homes are sitting at about 10% of sales to listing volume, whereas apartments are sitting at almost 15% of sales to listing volume. And so there's definitely a lot more activity in the apartment sector, townhome sector, as opposed to detached. And I think a lot of that's got to do with the affordability. So definitely an important factor for consumers. And it's going to be very interesting to see what, if any, pressure comes onto pricing as a result of the pandemic. The utopia, the best case scenario in some respects would be a reduction in price, but an increase in volume. Now, how that's achieved, I don't know, but that's really what the consumer market is looking for. We want some affordability. We have the intent to purchase. We have the desire to purchase. The interest rates are probably helping us, but we'd really like the market to be that much more affordable. Financial assistance and favorable mortgage rates. I think those are two strategies, whether they are federal, provincial, or private sector. If there is some support for home purchases and home ownership in the coming years, that will be a huge driver of recovery for the market. So I really hope that type of thing happens. Consumers are definitely looking for that type of support. We asked a question about the consumers' thoughts on real estate professionals like yourselves and what you are doing during COVID-19. We asked a simple question: are estate agents doing a good job during the crisis? And the responses were yes, 30%. My agent has been great. And that's a fantastic number, considering that only 13% said no, they could be doing more. So definitely, by and large, consumers are saying, hey, you guys are rolling up your sleeves, staying positive, working where you can to sell homes, view homes, and help buyers transact. A large number of people still saying there's no real difference in the performance that I perceive, but that's not a bad thing. I would say, from a net promoter score point of view, this is a positive outlook for your industry. What would you like to see your agent doing more of? So this was a question about, how can you better serve your market? 62% saying, please just post more content, better photos, particularly photos. Let us see inside this home, warts and all. And we all know how important photos are for anything online. Whether it's retail or hospitality, you want to see great pictures. But I think people want to see great pictures, and they want to see as many warts and all kind of views as they can to make their decision and to filter out the properties that they're most interested in. This is the same, post video and 360 tours. So these two are just saying, guys, give us as much media content as you can about these properties. And certainly at REW, we'll work hard to host as much of that content on your behalf, to promote it as actively as we can, to make sure it's in front of the right people. Live stream open houses, again, for a new feature, people are very excited about that option. And I would encourage you guys to start building that into your workflow if you haven't already. Responding to inquiries faster. You know, I think what this speaks to is, you know, let us make as much of the evaluation and qualification part of the property journey online as possible. It's not about sending 20, 30, 50 leads off a website like REW and seeing 20, 30 houses. You know, help us see as many of those as we can online, so that when we come to these open houses, or when we come to an traditional home viewing, we do so with real intent, and we maybe do it for a handful of properties. So I think that's a good sign. Then we asked some free format questions, and these ones are always quite difficult to package into a survey response, because they're not just simple graphs and charts and data. But we pulled out a couple of comments from the consumers on the platform, and I think they can be useful. We asked, do you have any other thoughts or comments on how COVID-19 has impacted your renting, buying, selling, or overall real estate experience? And, you know, a lot of the comments were quite difficult, because I think people feel emotional about this decision. And this is something that I think is a broader and more interesting component of what's happening, is this shift from a home being seen almost primarily as a financial asset to being seen more as a social asset. You know, it's now your home base, it's your office, it's your gym, it's your the safe sanctuary for your family. It's something, and I guess a home has always been that, but in the last 20 years, the focus has gone from a home being a home to a home being some type of financial asset that we trade up and that we commoditize and that we move from time to time. And I think the shift, at least I hope, consumers are shifting more towards that social asset perspective, where, you know, primary home ownership is something really important, not just from a financial perspective, but from a community perspective. So yeah, some comments about with layoffs and payments dwindling, we've been set back so far after all the hard work to get our pre-approval, and now nothing. So that was one tough comment. Again, on affordability comment, hoping that prices will go down if they don't. If they don't do it, if that doesn't happen now, nothing will do it. And that's a pretty good comment. So this is an opportunity for the market to sort of fundamentally change from a pricing point of view. Everything is on hold, the market feels dead. So definitely some consumer impression that the market is in a very tough spot. Then we asked, tell us what, if anything, we and the real estate professionals that we serve should be doing to help you in your current home search. You know, what can we be doing more of? And again, this comment came up about, you know, seeing better pictures taken with guaranteed measurements. That was something that also came through, is this idea of floor planning, this idea of giving a real impression of what the home looks like. The intention is to make more of the buying journey online. And realtors need to increase their accountability for truly depicting a property's strengths and weaknesses. And that's definitely the next chapter of property marketing online. You know, the first chapter was about getting all of your content online, moving out of print towards digital, and in some respect, a lot of the print decisions came into the digital world. You know, let's make this look as glossy as we can. Let's make it look as perfect as we can. Let's, you know, we're making it look magazine worthy, but we also have the opportunity with digital platforms to put as much content as possible in front of consumers, to make sure that when you get a call from a very intentful buyer. And I think that's going to be the next chapter in digital marketing, is how can you present properties in a fantastic, interesting and attractive way, but how can you also provide the content that empowers consumers to make decisions. Floor plans came up again. condos, pick a parking spot and storage locker, assurance for protection that no one will get the virus. So this is a question, a concern about, PPE and the practices that surround opening up the property market again. Virtual tours, pictures, backyard, facing a road. So again, it's all just about give me more content. So great insights from consumers. I hope that's been super useful. What we've tried to do is also add a layer of what we're seeing at REW. So here are a couple of key insights. I know that a lot of you had questions about those at the end of the last presentation, so I'll just go through these ones. These are new. On the audience side, we've seen a strong growth in the audience again through the course of April and into early May. We've got a 24% increase in the users on the platform over, if we compare this 30 days with the 30 days prior. So that's good to see that the consumer traffic is returning to the property listings. But more interesting, and this is a metric that had been very depressed during the last half of March and the first half of April. We've seen a strong rebound, a strong move for the positive in leads. So the last 30 days leads have been 41% up versus the prior month. So that's very, very positive to see. And this is representative of a higher conversion rate. So, the users have only grown 24%, but the leads have gone up 41%. So it means that more of the users on the platform are actually making inquiries to you, the realtors, through the platform. And that's a good sign. That shows that it's not just interest, but it's intent. And then we've also seen a 65% increase in user sign-up. So another intentful step that people take on the platform is signing up for property alerts or newsletters, or staying connected to the information coming off REW. And we've seen a big growth in that in month on month. So these are all indicators. I wouldn't say that they are indicating that we're going to have a great quarter or a great remainder of the year, but they're certainly not negative. And I think there's been a huge shock to the real estate industry in Canada and globally. We don't know what the impact is going to be long term, particularly around the affordability and finance question, but the consumer intent and the consumer desire is still there. And what we hope for in real estate is that this crisis has shown people how important a primary home is to them, how important it is to be in the property market. And so hopefully that new demand and desire for a home offsets the financial challenges that people may experience in the coming months. But those are just some insights from REW. I want to thank you very much. I'm going to take your questions now. I'm going to try and answer them as best I can, but please find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with all of you. I think one of the challenges for me being new in the Canadian real estate market is not having the opportunity to go to shows and network with all of you. So the best we can do is through digital platforms. So find me on LinkedIn and let's start a conversation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to go to some of the questions now. All right. So I'll just go through a couple of the questions, and please, guys, feel free to add as many as you want. Hopefully I answered most of them during the call, but I'll try and answer them in a bit more detail. So first of all, from Fred Hussey, what was the provincial breakdown of the response, and is it proportional to the population? Great question, and unfortunately it isn't provincially representative. REW as a platform is very strong in BC. We're the leading property website in BC by some margin, and we're growing fast in provinces like Alberta and Ontario, but I can't say that we're nearly the same scale as we are here on the West. And so if you look at the provincial breakdown of our respondents, the majority of them have come from the BC market, but we still have a strong respondents. I think it was somewhere between 15 and 20% response from Ontario. So yeah, it's not broadly representative, but it's representative of one of the key markets. What is your definition of a virtual open house? This is from Nadia. Is it live or pre-recorded? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think certainly our definition of a live stream open house is that one would be live. It would be hosted at a particular time, like this webinar, and it would have a number of consumers join it. A virtual open house could be that, or it could be a pre-recorded open house. And I think both of them have merit. Certainly the way that we see browsing behavior and consumer behavior on REW is people are on the platform at very different times throughout the day and throughout the week. You know, our Sunday traffic isn't much different to our Monday traffic. So I would suggest that you do both. I would suggest that you have a pre-recorded virtual open house, something that you speak to the merits of the home as best you can, and you provide opportunity for people either to interact with you one-on-one in a live video call fashion, or through a live stream open house. Another question from John about the split of respondents east versus west. I think I spoke to that in Fred's question. The date range with the study. So we did it's a difficult thing. We don't like to spam our users with, as you know, a whole bunch of emails. We obviously send them a lot of emails when your properties come on the market, when they're open houses or live stream open houses come on the market. So we're continually interacting with them, and we respect their inbox. So we don't try and hit them too hard. This response actually came from a 1-week sample set over the course of last week. So that's the date range. It's pretty narrow. It's very, very current and relevant. You know, we only collected the data last week and we're presenting it to you this week. So that was the date range. All right. Anybody else with any questions? I think I've answered most of them. Yeah, I just want to thank all of you on the call. I mean, we've had close to 200 people join us today, so I really appreciate all of the enthusiasm and energy that you show for the presentations and for the data. Reach out to us either at REW or to me directly on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation. Anything we can do to bring more insight and you know, better decision-making capability to you and your business, we'll try and do that. And I want to thank you so much for the partnership that you've shown with us through this time. You know, we're a technology startup in a difficult moment along with you guys, and it feels good to be part of this real estate community. So thank you very much for all your effort. Have a great day, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks very much.